What's up, guys? Ricky and Mickey back with another installment on the RX-8. We're gonna go ahead and get back to it after a little bit of a break. We are planning to tackle the E-level and height sensor installation today. And now, as I explained previously, we started on this car with the RX-8 with an entry-level Accuair switch speed setup, which is basically a really basic pressure-based setup. And the E-level setup is sort of their baller setup, which is includes a different ECU that monitors the ride height of the car. Where switch speed just works off of pressure, you're basically guessing at what your ride height is based off of what the pressure is in each corner, which is completely arbitrary depending on how much weight is in the car and those sorts of things. So it's a bit of a crapshoot knowing what your ride height looks like from the inside of what it's doing on the outside. Where E-level actually allows you to set the car at a particular ride height and it always stays there because the ECU monitors it and adds air. When someone gets in the car or you put something in the trunk, it automatically levels. The Accuair system that we're installing is the CVT system, which has the compressor and the valves built into the air tank. So it's all inside, and we've previously done that conversion. So we've taken our switch speed, which was a standard air tank with an external compressor, and we put the internal Wabco Accuair compressor inside the tank, and the valves are on the end caps. So what that does is it declutters your trunk, it puts everything into one unit, and it looks way nicer. So today Ricky's gonna tackle the wiring. I'm gonna pop the wheels off and start tackling putting the height sensors in. Hi Ricky.
Hello, what's going on, guys?
So we've got a bit of wiring to sort of clean up in here. We did a okay job on the switch speed install, but it was because we had already known that we were gonna be upgrading to the E-level, so we didn't button it up the way we normally would. We just tucked everything in behind the panels and made sure everything was secure. Now we'll go back and make everything the way we would want it if it were our car, with the final E-level setup with CVT. So we're gonna get cracking. Ooh, shirt's coming off. All right, so my main man Ricky has basically decided that it's better just to remove all the old switch speed wiring and start from scratch, which is what he did. And we're now, it's actually fairly simple. There's one little thing that you have to do, which is very clear in the instructions.
Right.
Is that you have to switch a couple pins in the harness in order for the CVT to function properly. And
it's the same on wires, actually. In the back of this plug right here, you have to remove the old green and the old yellow, and then put the new green and the new yellow back in it. That's it.
So unpin, repin.
Same colors, color for color.
So now we're trying to sort out where we want to mount the E-level ECU. We kind of have an idea. This is basically the box that contains our LED indicator that tells us what the CVT is doing at any point in time. That's something we want to keep visible. So we're going to try to find a good location for that so that it can be accessed or is actually visible and we can see the LED light flashing when we need to. So now the wiring is fairly simple, eh Rick?
Yep, it is.
Okay, so very straightforward. The instruction manual is really good, and there's also some great videos online if you aren't good at reading comprehension.
Like me.
Yeah, so I'm still, I've been under the wheel wells trying to sort out where to hang these sensors. The FDs are actually very simple in comparison to the RX-8. There's really no good spot to mount the height sensor in an RX-8. So we did source some height sensor mounting brackets, and unfortunately we only have 2 because we used 2 on another install that we did and we had ordered 4. So I'm going to use these 2 probably on the front of the car. They're just nice water jet jammers that we know work, and then I'll have to use probably what most people do is use a piece of aluminum strap and just make our own little brackets to hang these off of the inside of the wheel well. And what these do, these are the arms that actually tell the E-level ECU what ride height your car is. This would be you know, a full droop situation. This would be a full raise situation.
That's what she said.
So there's a potentiometer inside of this little control box here, and then our wiring for the E-level plugs into the plug here, and this is always communicating with your E-level, telling your car how high it is at any point in time on each corner. So these are the brains of the operation besides the E-level ECU portion of it. So it's important that these are installed properly. They don't over travel or under travel. Well, they don't over travel because you'll break the plastic arm. And everybody says, oh, why don't you upgrade those plastic arms to something billet or metal of some sort? Well, they're made plastic on purpose so that this is a point of failure. If these were metal, it would cause damage to the sensor itself, and that's a costly breakage. These are probably over $100 a pop. This little arm costs $2 to replace when it's plastic. So that's the explanation for that. So anyway, I'm going to get back to trying to figure out where to mount these in the wheel wells, and how we're going to make brackets to mount them, and we'll be well on our way to getting this buttoned up.
2 hours later.
Alright guys, so fast forward a couple of hours. I've been running around doing many different things in the shop today, but my main goal is to get these height sensors mounted. As you can see, I've done that. We've got a custom bracket with our height sensor mounted, our new height arm tapped into the upper control arm, so that as this articulates, it moves this arm as well. We've got our safety on here, which means that we are good to go as far as our travel, so we can now remove that. So we've got less than 100 degrees of travel, which is what these are set up for, 100 degrees. We're probably only using about 80 degrees of that sweep, so that's actually really good. I've also gone ahead and finished the wiring here. So I basically cut out about, believe it or not, 10 to 12 feet of wire. So this now comes directly from the E-level ECU that's just right up inside the trunk here, out the bottom, and this is sensor 3. And we're all plugged in and ready to go. So that's how the finished sensor setup looks. Pretty happy with the way it turned out. Now I've already started the other side. Once you get one figured out, it's sort of easy to do the other. So I've already made the bracket, mounted it, basically got our arm in place, already cut the arm down to our 2-inch mark so that we have clearance here from between this suspension cup to the arm. We're good to go there. That's our 100-degree sweep there. So now I just need to, I've marked the arm, I need to drill the hole and make the connection between our height sensor and our upper control arm. Once I'm done there, I've already cut the harness wiring on both sides. The other side is over here. I'll go ahead and solder those together, and we'll have custom length height sensor wiring. As you can see, there's quite a bit that gets cut out because this is a universal kit. So, all right, so as I explained, the next step is to put our height adjustment rod in, which fits right in here on our arm, and then mounts to the lower control arm here. Inside is all thread. It's hard for you guys to see, I know, but this is a threaded rod that runs in the middle of this rod. So I've removed the plastic heim on the end, and I'm going to go ahead and cut this down. I've got my length where my thumb is, and then I'll re-put the rubber piece on once it's all done, just to make it look pretty, but it's essentially a piece of all thread with 2 plastic heims on the end. Okay, so now I've got one heim on one end, and I've got our lengthened all thread sticking out the other. So now I gotta snag the other one off of here, and I'm only doing this because I don't need to waste a whole piece of all thread. Actually was able to do both of these rear mounts or rear rods off of one all thread. So I like to keep some of this around in case we need it for future projects. So this one will get completely saved because we're able to go back and use one from the other side. So this is the scrap rubber hose that goes over top of this. This is the beauty hose. Basically it fits over top, and you just cut it off, put your rod end on, and then you've got a custom length rod. Little Mickey tip. We use a lot of different lubricants around the shop here. This Accuair, albeit expensive, is easily the best lubricant that we have around the shop at the moment. I've been putting it on everything when I'm cutting things on the tools, threading things, tapping things. It's called Accuair, and the stuff is the jam. All right, so there's our new rod end. I haven't put the beauty rubber on yet. I want to get everything custom length first on the car, and then once we go back, I'll blow this apart and make it pretty like the one on the driver's side, like this. So I can cheat a little bit. We're pretty close in length, assuming that both sides are the same. Okay, so in an attempt to sort of simplify this process and you guys understand what I'm doing here and how I'm getting the lengths that I need. Basically, I've got a transmission jack that I've got placed underneath the wheel or the hub, and I've got it underneath the control arm, the bottom control arm here. And what I'm doing is I'm actually giving this thing a full sweep of motion. So I'm using this to act as though we're dumping the car all the way to the ground. And you can see that our control arm is raising straight up. And as that goes up, that will in turn move our height sensor. And then what happens is this thing's doing a calculation and sending that data off to our E-level ECU, telling our car what height it's at all corners at all times, so that it can make on-the-fly adjustments, which is pretty rad. So I'm gonna go ahead and push the wheel all the way to the top of its travel, which would mean the car is slammed all the way to the ground. So now you can see the hub is completely as high as it'll go, and you'll know because where our pad is for our lift, we've got it on a jacking point under the car. And as you raise this tranny jack, when it gets to a point where it's not going to go, the suspension's not going to travel up anymore, you'll see it start to raise off of the lift pad itself. That's where you want to be very careful and not go too much, because we really don't want the car falling off the lift. So we know now that this is tucked as high as it's going to go. So this is our extreme angle of our upper control arm, which is pretty extreme. But we can see here that where I have the yellow mark on the arm is where my bolt's going to go. So I'm going to mimic where that's at right now on here and hold that in place. I don't really like the location. I want to move it forward a little bit more towards the camera because it feels like it's not straight. So you want to make sure that this arm can articulate with the upper control arm as smoothly as possible in this upward and downward sweeping motion. And once you bolt this onto the arm, you want to wiggle this while you're articulating the suspension and make sure that there's no binding in this arm. If there's binding in this arm, you're eventually going to snap this plastic arm. Snapping this plastic arm means that you're not going to have a reading anymore because it's no longer going to be connected to the E-level. So this is a pretty critical step. You really want to take your time and not rush this. I can go ahead now and I'm going to remark the arm where I want to drill it, but I'm satisfied with our travel. We are using the 2-inch position on the plastic arm, 2 inches of travel, so we're good. If you wanted to double check, you could let the suspension all the way down now. So I'll go ahead and do that so you guys can see. So I'm going to go ahead and twist the suspension all the way down. So this should be full droop when there's no pressure on it here. Man, this thing's got a lot of suspension travel. Okay, there's our full droop. And we have our safety in line. So we know that if this little safety guy is on, that's as far down as we want our arm to go. And if you can see, we're too low. So that's a good thing. We're gonna move that up to here. And then that's well within our travel range. So now I can move on to tapping this arm. So basically I will drill a hole, run a tap through it, and I can bolt this up. Once I bolt this up and check it again for travel, one last time, then I'll pull this arm back off, put the beauty rubber slide on here, and this corner will be done. Oh, besides I need to reconnect the wiring. But once that's done, this corner is done. And like I said, once you do one corner and you move on to the next, they're going to be the same, usually left or right, unless you're dealing with a gas filler or something like that from one side to the other. In this case, I didn't have to mess with that because we're working behind the wheel. This would be the gas filler on this side, and it does pose a problem because I wouldn't be able to mount a sensor here because this is just a plastic cover. It doesn't, you know, I'd have to get in behind there. So the other side doesn't have that because obviously there's no gas filler on that side. So being that I'm going to be drilling on a round arm, I went ahead and used a center punch to mark the arm. That way when I put the drill bit in, it doesn't want to walk up or down because it is on a round surface. This helps a lot. All right, now that's mounted, you can see there's play in this. So I need to go ahead and tighten up this upper bolt as well. And then you should still have this wiggle movement in here under load, because if it doesn't wiggle, you've got too much tension and it's probably gonna break. So make sure you keep it nice and loose throughout its whole travel. All right, so we've got the arm all in place with a pretty ring on it. Got good play in there. So we're gonna go ahead and run this thing through its motions up and down, check everything out, make sure it's good to go, button up the wiring, and then we'll be on to the front. All right, just put down the soldering iron. Got my little soldering stand over here. Nothing fancy, just the basics, but I use this stuff all the time, so it gets a lot of use. As you can see here, went ahead and shortened this up. Sensor number 4, if it will focus on that for you guys. Of course it won't. Sensor 4 is shortened up. You can see everything's heat tube shrinked so that it's nice and weatherproof. We've got a weather pack connection on here. So now we can go ahead and route this the way we wanted to route it, and then plug in right here. Just a nice tight connection, and we'll go ahead and zip tie this, and it'll sit something like this, nice and out of the way. Super tidy install, just the way I like it. And we also routed the as you can see here, this is the sensor wire, comes down along the subframe over to the other side because the ECU is on the driver's side of the car. So we ran it nice and high above the exhaust. There's plenty of airflow between the top of the exhaust and the area of the subframe where we have that mounted. So not too concerned about that. Should be very good and very functional for this gentleman when he takes delivery of this car. And I'm going to come back tomorrow morning and tackle the front sensors, and this thing will be back on the ground, and we will do the calibration and take it for a drive and make sure everything's working properly. I'm going to go back to my original comment in the beginning of the video. Take your time. It's so important on this. This isn't something or a process that you want to rush. Do it right. Do it right the first time. You won't have to go back and ever revisit this ever again if you do. So I'll see you guys tomorrow. We're back. We're moving on to the front sensors, and I already kind of started without you guys, so let me get you up to speed here. Watch that broom.
Don't kill yourself.
This is a bad place to put a broom.
Look, I'm not done
Until
sweeping.
someone gets hurt.
I'm not done sweeping.
All right, so it might be a little hard to see in here because it's very black, but what we're gonna do now is pick an area where we can mount this height sensor. I got some fancy little height sensor brackets that I showed you guys previously in the video. I'm going to use those on the front. I made my own for the rear, but we have those two fancy ones. So we're going to go ahead and use this nice flat area here on the frame rail to mount our height sensor bracket. What we're going to try to do is mimic the angle of this upper control arm. So as you can see, it doesn't sit 90 degrees to the frame rail. It actually sits, I don't know, more about 45 degrees or something in that range. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a little bend on our bracket so that the height sensor is in line with this. That way, when that rod is going up and down,
that's what she said.
it's in line with the control arm. So I've already started bending it, and I figured, hey, I better pick up the camera and show you guys how I'm doing it. Over here, I've just put the bracket in the vise, and I went ahead and just gave it a couple love taps with our fancy little 3-pound sledge. And I think I've got the angle pretty close to where I need it. So what I'm going to do now is take it over to the car and put it up. Actually, I can see by looking at it right now that I'm way off. I need to go more, but let's just check for good measure. So as you can see, I've barely been able to get it away from the frame rail, so we need to be out here. So I want the sensor, like I said, in line with this upper control arm. So I got to put a much bigger bend on this. If you're fancy and have a little sheet metal brake or finger bend at the shop, this is obviously a little bit of a caveman way of doing it, but it's what we got for tools, so we're using it. A little more extreme bend there. I still think it needs quite a bit more, but we're going to check that. right, we're getting there. So now we can see we're starting to get closer to that angle. So again, we need another probably 20 or 30 degrees of bend on that bad boy.
You know what that means.
Video time, baby. Ooh. Ooh, it's so close. What do you think? I think it needs just a little bit more.
You are pretty much right there, bro.
You think?
Yeah.
That should get her. Ta-da! That's pretty aggressive.
It is.
It's not, definitely not 90.
It's about 45.
Yeah. Yeah, there we go. And now, keep in mind, once you mount this to your frame rail, you can probably go ahead and just, you know, if you need to take a little bend out or give it a little bit more, just a couple degrees. Once it's mounted, you'll probably be able to press it in or out a little bit. This isn't too terribly thick of metal, so yeah, baby. So that's going to leave our arm pretty much in the center of this control arm, so that's good. The closer you get to the pivot point, the less travel you have, obviously. Science. So we want to get it out a little further. Again, all of this theory and application is explained in the Accuair E-level management instructions. So give that a quick read before you start this installation, and you'll be well on your way. All right, so we've called an audible here on the height sensor. As you guys saw, we were initially going to mount it in the front or in the rear position of the both sides of the suspension. However, I don't like the distance between the sensor and the arm. So what I've decided to do is actually move it to the front of the suspension arm. And I've already gone ahead and drilled 2 pilot holes for my mounting hardware. So this is going to go right here. And as you can see, it's in line with our suspension arm, our upper A arm. And it's going to allow this to travel straight up and down once it's mounted on the bracket. So I'm going to go ahead and get that mounted now, and then I'll show you guys how it looks once it's mounted to the chassis. Okay, so now I'm going to show you the height sensor bracket mounted. We've just gone ahead and mounted it directly to the frame rail here. And now we'll need to adjust. I've got the bolts through the sensor on the bracket, and it's basically loose at the moment. So I'm going to go ahead and get it lined up to where I want it and snug up these 2 Allen head bolts. And then that will allow this to be hard mounted, and then we can go ahead and figure out the articulation on our sensor. So we have 2 inches of travel, so we're going to go ahead and use the second one. Again, 1 inch of travel, 2 inches of travel, 3 inches of travel, and 4 inches of travel. These are for all different suspension setups. So we're using 2 inches, so I can go ahead and lop this plastic arm off after the second hole, and then go ahead and make tap the arm and make our linkage, just like we did in the rear. What the hell are you doing?
Well, that's not going to work.
Oh my god. Alright, so we got the new height sensor setup installed. As you can see, I actually moved it up about 1 inch from where I initially had it. Just because I didn't like the position and the overall rod length was too short.
That's what she said.
So here's our new setup. Now I just got to route the wiring, the harness for our sensor. We've got a lot of extra here, as you can see. This will come around and plug into the back side of our sensor here. And then this one will be done. I can move on to the driver's side and we'll put this thing back on the ground.
A little later.
We've gone ahead and moved on from height sensors. We've just temporarily plugged in the unit to make sure that everything is working properly. And obviously it goes way back up there, but we just got it sitting here for now. And as you guys can hear, or maybe you can't hear, the compressor is actually running, which is a giant improvement over the Accuair compressor that was in here before. That would literally rattle your fillings loose while it was filling up the tank. Right now we're just monitoring the control module for the Accuair system. This is telling us the flashing green light means that you can look on here, flashing green light means that the compressor is running, and that when compressor turns off, oh yeah, that the compressor is running, sorry. So let's see, it should get progressively faster as it gets closer to being full. So we're gonna go ahead and give this some time to fill up with air And then we can put some air into the bags and make sure that we've got all of our airlines working properly. And then at that point we can put the wheels on and get this thing off of and do our calibration for the E-level, which is really cool.
1 hour later.
All right, so fast forward about an hour. Ricky and I got the tank in the car, all mounted up. We still have to put the interior panel in over here, but it's all buttoned up. What's awesome is John's gonna have full use of his trunk because the tank is tucked so far up underneath that basically everything is accessible, which is awesome. That's one of the downsides to air systems, is you have to find a place to put all the components. But that's the beauty of the CVT system, as it puts all the components, for the most part, inside the tank. So once you mount the tank, all you have to do is run your wiring and your airlines, and there's really nothing else to mount or put in. So we've mounted the control box over here. This is the diagnostic box that flashes an LED. I've gone ahead and just stuck the card here behind it for now, just so we don't lose it, and that John has it whenever he gets the car. But it's a really nice out-of-the-way location for that, and not noticeable once everything's back in the trunk. It's pretty hidden away over in the corner, which is really cool. Loving the way this is turning out. I'm so sad we gotta give this car away. Ricky, should we keep this car?
Absolutely. Oh no!
What happened?
I put the seatbelt behind the seat.
It's getting late. We're making stupid mistakes, but rest assured, we'll pull it back apart and do it right. John, you're gonna love this car, bro. I'm so jealous. Ricky and I want to keep it so bad.
The next day.
All right, so we're back with the final button up on the RX-8. Got all the height sensors mounted and installed, all routed properly, out of the way. Things are looking nice. I went ahead and shortened up all of these sensor wires so that they are basically custom made to the car, no longer just a standard length harness. On this side you can see it's a mirror image of the other side, which is exactly how I like things, and I'm really happy with the way this all turned out. Looks super tidy and looks like it's meant to be there, just the way I like it. So it's time to put this thing on the ground now and run it through its paces. I've already checked with the tranny jack the up and down cycle on the sensors. We've actually gone ahead and moved out to the fourth pivot arm, the fourth pivot on the arm, where initially I was planning to use the second one, but these bags, especially on the front of this car, seem to have heaps of travel. Like, it's probably like 3 to 3.5 inches of travel. So using the fourth one is a nice safe bet. It'll allow us to not have any breakage problems with our sensors. So, time to put the wheels on, figure out where we're at. All right, so we got the car out in the middle of the garage on level floor. Ricky's going down to the basement. And the Accuair system has an auto calibration, so I basically hold down the program button and the 2 button for 5 seconds, and right now what it's doing is actually operating all on its own. And so essentially, I'm trying to hide from you. Gotcha. So essentially, it's making adjustments all by itself. It's basically figuring out on the height sensor where it is in its travel, and it's figuring out what the optimal ride height is going to be and all those sorts of things. So essentially, once this is done programming, it's going to give us its suggestion for our ride height. I should probably not make up what I think it's doing and actually read the manual really quick and then tell you what it's really doing. So as you can see, guys, the E-level is calibrating currently, and that's what the flashing lights going 1 to 3, 3 to 1 mean. When that stops flashing, we know that the car is calibrated, and we can then at that point set up our number 1, 2, and 3 settings, which those on the touchpad mean One is usually your like low cruise height, like when you're pulling into a Cars and Coffee or something, you want the car to look tough as nails, but you wouldn't normally ride at that height like around town for fear of speed bumps and things like that. Oh, it's so trippy watching the car just jump around on its own, nobody controlling it. I think that's ride height right there, boys. Yep, that's our ride height. I should say that's our suggested ride height according to where our height sensors are. Oh, nope, still calibrating. Oh, it's so rad. Yeah, so it's saying when the calibration is completed, the positions will be saved as follows. Accuair has included an awesome instruction manual with this kit. Tells you all the setup features and all that. Basically what it's going to do is it's going to give us our position 1, 2, and 3. Position 1 is 10% of the total suspension travel. Position 2 is 50% of the total suspension travel. And position 3 is 90% of the total travel. And now it's done. This is our ride height. See how it's no longer flashing and it's on 2? That means it's completed the calibration and it's ready to rip. So this is our driving height. Damn! Damn! That's driving, well, that's suggested driving height. That's at 50% of our suspension travel. So this is a weight off our backs. Ricky and I have been trying to get this car basically completed for the last 2 or 3 days. And we've really honestly focused on taking our time and just making sure that everything is done properly the way we would want it if it was our car. It's gonna be a sad day when John comes to pick this up. I think we might shed a couple tears. I guess that's it, boys. I'm actually gonna drive the car around a bit because I wanna make sure that the E level is set exactly how it needs to be for John, so when he gets in it to drive it back to Vermont, he doesn't have any issues. But yeah, it's coming to a completion. The project is about done. We're having a detailer come tomorrow to give it a good once over the interior and the engine bay. It's been a good run. Well, boys, I want to say a special shout out to Universal Air Suspension because they came through clutch, making our old coilovers that were on this car into airbags for us, which is so sick. They bolted right in. They made some new front hats for us to make some clearance for us in the front for the bags. So some custom work as well. Thank you, UAS, so much. You guys are rad. And a special shout out to our boys at, where are they at? They're right over there, Accuair Suspension. They make an awesome product, very well documented online on how to do installs, stuff like that with their product. So if you're interested in an E-level setup, a switch speed setup, a CVT setup, any of their componentry, you can check out their products available on our store at store.throtl.com. We've got all the components that they make available for sale.
That was a mouthful, by the way.
I don't want to hear it. You guys know what I mean. We sell Accuair. Go to throtl.com.
We sell it all.
Yeah.
Dude, I wish they can actually ride in there and feel it.
Yeah, because honestly,
the Universal Air Suspension ride is so sick.
Yeah. Should we talk about that for a second? So, a lot of people don't like air suspension, and they say, "Oh, why do you bag everything? Why do you bag everything?" And I will say this to you, and keep it brief. If you've ever ridden in a properly suspended air suspension car, you will never put coilovers on your car ever again.
Yep, that's right.
If it's done right and you use a good strut, the problem is there's a lot of crappy struts on the market.
Yep.
If you use a good strut, such as UAS, you will not be disappointed.
Yep.
You'll be able to hang with coilover cars in the turns. There's no questions about it. I've seen it firsthand. I've ridden in the cars firsthand when I worked at Accuair. Do it right and you will be pumped. Use crummy struts and you're going to be super bummed and you're going to hate air and you're going to be like the rest of the keyboard cowboys that talk trash.
Yep. You can easily track this car the way it is.
Yep.
I've tracked my car. My car's got air suspension.
Yeah, I've ridden in your car. I didn't even know it was on there until you told me.
Yep. Yep.
That's a lie. I knew that.
I've tracked my car. My car's been in the track with air suspension. Everybody told me I was crazy.
He's slow though, so. Air suspension doesn't make you.
Track day.
Air suspension and coilovers.
Track day. We should have a track day. You, me, TJ, and Helen. We should do it.
You made me lose my train of thought. Anyway, yeah, I'm down for track days. That sounds like fun. All right, guys. Thank you for your subscriptions. Thank you for following along. I know this was a lengthy process. Don't be scared. You can do it. Yeah, thanks for the thumbs up, thanks for the comments. We'll see you in the next episode. Bye!